Okay, so this carburetor came off my small block. This was carburetor number 3. Yeah. I know, I got a box of these anyway. I got a whole bunch of them. This one just came off the 454. And I mentioned on a couple of social media groups that, and maybe through some YouTube comments, this one is granny tuned. The secondary fuel rods are really wide, so it doesn't allow much fuel delivery through the secondaries. Also, on this one, even though this is on a big block, if you look, watch here, I'm just going to push down. It doesn't open the full 90 degrees. I'll show you on this one really quick. This one comes down and see, opens full 90 degrees right down, see, right into that. In fact, I had to cut a notch into this part to clear this. Now, in my early days of modifying carburetors, another buddy of mine, we weren't into street racing or you know, really doing too much head-to-head stuff on the roads as much as we were getting into high-speed chases against the cops back in the day. And we learned how to go as far as simply removing this rod, because this rod is not entirely needed. I do know that there's some plus, there is a little bit of a plus side to having that on there for some reason. It's mainly for fuel economy. It's not really much of a power maker. It's more of a power saver. But the secondary fuel doors, the reason I keep playing with it, you'll see me just repeatedly doing this, right, is I've seen some people will go and do the Allen key adjustment, get in there with the little flathead. They'll back the screw out counterclockwise to loosen off the spring, and then what they're doing is they're going like this and seeing how it pops back up. It always returns, right? I'll give you an example. See, the reason this one's sticking a little bit is it's just dry. There's no oil in it. That's all it is. It's just dry. This carburetor sat for about 6 years. Whereas this one, I just had it running earlier today, and then I dumped the fuel out of it, taking it off the motor. And then bringing it back here. So I have a second carburetor identical to this one. It's got the it's got those jets, like that one there, and this one here. So this basically is the same carburetor for a 350 truck or van. But this was also on a 454. Now, that's got me kind of scratching my head a little bit, wondering if this is actually the original carburetor for the 454. Because, like I said, this thing's tuned really minimal, right? I've pulled 4 barrels off of 472 Cadillacs, or not pulled them off, but I've actually just examined carburetors on big block engines that normally open full blast like this. Now, Hot Rod Magazine makes a mention of a 305 5-liter high output version for the Camaro, or for, you know, whatever other small block project is out there. I had an 84 Caprice station wagon with the 305 700 R4 342 geared, and what's the story? So the carburetor that was on it was not the original for 84. It was an older 70s carburetor that came off of something. Either a truck or a bus. Because the secondary fuel rods that were on that one carburetor that I had extremely thin tips. And factory Rochesters always have nickel or chrome plated secondary fuel rods. They're always silver. And then a few years back, before they became discontinued or obsolete, they had an aftermarket aftermarket fuel rods. I don't know who's got them now or if you can special order them, but the local parts guys, performance places I've known of, used to have them on the shelf a number of years back, and I was probably the only one who walked through the store one day and went, "Oh, you got those!" But at the time, I was running a different setup. I had a fuel injector 350, and I wasn't playing with the 4 barrels anymore. And then some years later, the reason I'm swapping over is this carburetor is going on to the 454, and there's a little bit of yes for fuel economy and no for fuel economy. And at the same time, this was the carburetor that decimates all other engines out there. Now, when I told a guy once, I've got a 454, it'll eat your little 5.7 Hemi in your Ram pickup. Like, it'll literally leave your engine in pieces. And this is part of the cause, if it doesn't leave my engine in pieces, right? So, this motorhome flies like an ambulance, dude. It's not, this is not your granny's, this is not your grandma and grandpa's motorhome anymore. So, no, my 454 is up there in the mess. But anyways, one of the nice things in the winter time, I wouldn't want to be outside freezing my butt off underneath a vehicle right now. It's kind of nice. I can work from inside. Oh, my wood stove. And I'm not lit up right now with the wood stove. I'm just using the stove top for heat right now. And I turned it way down because I walked through the kitchen, walked past my kitchen out back here with a gas-soaked carburetor, and my first immediate fear was, oh no, the vapors. What happens if the vapors go up? And right now I got vents and windows are closed, and I'm just doing my thing. Go lay down. Come on, go lay down. Go lay down. Good boy. Cat's getting in the way again. So I'm just moving things around and kind of manipulating stuff a little bit. Where did I put that? And I took my glasses off because I'm actually becoming, well, I'm nearsighted, but I'm starting to develop that farsightedness, or where everything's getting blurry up close and small detail. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this carburetor just yet. This carburetor overall, though, it's still in decent shape as far as I know. Yeah. So I could do the tweaks to this one, but I don't want to. I have 2 carburetors identical. I have a second carburetor exactly like this, and I don't want to go and stretch these ones out. The primaries on, but the reason I took this one off though was I got a feeling this one's leaking. Either the float bowl's leaking. I know it's got a lot of gasket sweat showing around the top. Typical warped air horn, possibly. This one I haven't had that problem with. This one I think has been rebuilt by the looks of the gaskets. This is also a slightly newer carburetor. It's got the Torx. It's got the Torx or the Allen key type screws in it. Whereas this one's the old flatheads and the Phillips underneath. One of these carburetors I did have to re-torque or re-snug all the bolts underneath. The old school mechanics always warn you, don't drop your carburetor even when you're setting it down on your bench. Right, just be real gentle. The reason for it is because you don't want your float settings to go out on them. I knew a guy who, years ago, he would go and rifle a free carburetor from the junkyard. And then to avoid walking out the door with it, he would chuck it over the fence, literally like a 12-foot high throw in the air, and then leave the 4-barrel laying on the ground to go get it. And then wonder why his engine wouldn't run right. And I said, you don't ever drop Don't ever drop, let alone throw, a carburetor that you intend to use. So believe it or not, there's a lot of stupid people out there that just don't think, you know, oh, on the outside it looks like a fairly solid, you know, unit, a couple moving parts here and there, without thinking. The problem with the fucking millennials is everything's all fuel injected and computer controlled. They don't know this old shit. And then it's only a small handful of us still in existence that actually understand this stuff. So, so this engine, or this carburetor, doesn't come with that rear, this is where that rear secondary, there's that rear secondary thing that would kick in, that would kick down your choke and high idle cam, right? Bring down your kick down in your low idle setting. This one doesn't have that. I've never had an engine since I was 15 years old. I have never had it. 32 years doing this. I have never had an engine with this. I've worked with Camaros and Caprices. Okay? 80s and 90s. Well, 80s Caprices, just before they went to throttle body, and before they went to that multi-port fuel-injected LT1 in the mid-90s. I had a 95, so I know what the fuck I'm talking about. And I'm just making quick comparisons of the two, right? This doesn't have the vacuum brake booster, neither does this one. I've been running 1-tons for several years that didn't use vacuum boost for the power brakes. Instead, it's hydro boost through the power steering pump. So I'm just looking at what this carburetor is different. I don't know what this port's for, but on the newer one, this doesn't have it. This is a fuel vapor. This is supposed to be a fuel vapor line that would go to a charcoal canister, or it could be a fuel return that just goes back to the tank. And I've never used this, so I just leave it alone the way it is. This has to come off. This was for an aftermarket hose and clamp with an inline filter. There is an inline filter in here, and I believe on this one and on this. So all I did on this one, I took the filter out, quickly examined it, and then it had the little spring valve, or the little spring valve inside of here that sometimes will block the fuel from going through, or it's not getting enough fuel pressure. And all I did was I pulled a rubber piece out, took the spring and that little check valve out of there, and then stuck it back in without it, with the rubber piece back in though. So there's still, right where this part presses in, there's a spring that pushes the filter up against it. It still has the rubber seal, so the fuel still goes through the filter. So hopefully that minimizes. But there's also, I have two filters. There's an inline filter underneath the vehicle. This motorhome has 2 gas tanks. I don't know yet if the fuel tank selector or fuel tank solenoid switch works, but I could eventually get to fixing that eventually. So I blocked all of these off to a certain extent, and I think I was running my vacuum advance. Trying to figure that out. Oh, I was running it off the front. Oh, here's the other. When some retard fucking does a rebuild or an attempted rebuild, takes this little baffle plate off the carburetor. Some people think, oh, that doesn't really do anything. It's not a big deal. All this does is in high performance wide open throttle, or even in part throttle, it somehow prevents the primaries or the secondaries from interfering with each other. This little baffle plate. I forget what exactly it does. And then I can't remember what this is exactly here either. But this is characteristically, this is only a 750 CFM, not an 800. And then In the HP books that I used to have in the 90s, around 25 years ago, I had some manuals that I read up on from cover to cover. And originally, most of these carburetors for the 5-liter, some of the smaller displacement small block engines, we would only open to this secondary opening that much. And that was considered to be around 590, typically around a 600 CFM. And then for larger displacement motors, they made them so they opened they opened out fully. And this is basically set up as this is 750 CFM. Now, what would make it an 800 CFM, Pontiac, Buick, certain big block, the 455 used them, was right here where these primary jets are, I think. Where those rings, see those little rings right around there? There's an extra casting rib that holds those rings in place, and they create just a little bit extra air restriction in the primaries, and that's what makes it a 750 CFM. In 800 CFM, these are different. A slightly different setup in here. I forget what it is exactly, but it exists in Google, and other YouTube videos shows what it is. Another thing I did years ago was made flathead slots in these fuel mixture screws, so I didn't have to fish around for a discontinued or obsolete type tool or try to Mickey Mouse something from an old brake line to turn these things. And I mark a screwdriver handle in a specific way so I can increment those adjustments 1/4 turn at a time to get the fine tuning done. Now, the alleged quadrabog that typically causes the engine to either stumble, hesitate, or react a certain way is sometimes if this opens too fast on heavy throttle, if you punch it to the floor, all of a sudden the butterflies underneath crack open, and it causes a really high vacuum to hit this too fast. Then what commonly happens is you'll lean out, it'll get too much air and not enough fuel. The trick to that was, like I said, I had a carburetor once that was probably a school bus, might have been a school bus carburetor. And anyways, it was set up to squirt the fuel in much faster here. Another common problem may be with the accelerator pump. I'm just gonna I'll clean this up a little bit later on. Oh, this is that's okay. This is a remanufactured carburetor. It's got the tag on it. So I know this manufacturer. I've bought parts off of them many times before. But I got this carburetor, I think I got it from a yard sale. And then, like I said, I do have another carburetor identical to this. And that one came out of a pick and pull. So I got that one from the junkyard. This is going to come off later on. I don't need that anymore. I've taken similar stuff off before. Yeah, this was for a cruise control I no longer use. Have no need for that. The closest thing I might go to a cruise control might be something more like a lawnmower throttle, come to think of it. But I'm not 100% certain on that yet. I've got a few kind of little tricks up my sleeve of stuff that I might try in future, but I'm not 100% affirmative of that. Kind of just skating on some thin ice and trying to stay out of trouble right now. But this carburetor, I don't know, I just got a feeling that it's not metering right. And I'm gonna just do a few things to it later on. I got another carburetor that's kind of a junk carburetor, similar to this one actually. And yeah, this see that the secondary lift cam. That's a brand new part. See how it's got no wear? It's got no wear on it. It's got a nice even lobe as it goes up. On old carburetors, when they start showing wear, look closely. See how there's a little bit of a groove on the one side, and then as it comes up, right? That one's actually still in good shape, even for its age. You know, the plastic gets a little discolored. You just have to be real gentle with these, because those can break off. There's like a in the secondary in this linkage or the rod, it's got a D shape. It's got a flat spot, and that part just sits on that. And anyways, if you make a mistake of dropping this down and then putting pressure on that, you can break that. And then, but I've seen some of these wear out after a while. And I have one carburetor that is kind of dead, that needs to be built later on. So what I'm doing right now, so the two carburetors side by side, I'm just doing a quick visual of where the idle setting screw is vaguely. This one might be a little bit low, because this one came off a small block. And so I may have to bump it up just a little bit. There was another adjustment I learned around 25-30 years ago. With this whole springy mechanism on the secondaries, on a racetrack, so on, anyways, okay, backtrack. Okay, so on the street, you'll get to, this'll bump up to half throttle before the secondaries kick in. The secondary lockout is currently on, so you can see how that just moves. But there's a trick. When you take all this, oh for fuck's sakes. My fucking battery's dying. So there's a trick anyways where you can take a hacksaw blade. There's even there's already a line there, but you can actually reduce this. This is an advance right in here, to where you can actually get these secondaries to open up full 90 degrees or just slightly forward. And I forget, there was a story I read out of a manual where it corrects the fuel distribution and it prevents the lean out on 2 cylinders. I think it's at the back of the engine or the front of the engine, where certain cylinders starve for fuel when this thing's at wide open throttle. And there is a fix for that. These carburetors I found are really good on small block engines, but I guess, I don't know, I'm hearing around that not so good on big block. And I'm kind of questioning that myself. Now, right now, yeah, I'm not interested in this. This thing's going to be expensive to run. This is not going to be a cheap. This one's not cheap on gas. I wish I could take all this apart and show you a head-to-head comparison of the two. But this one, I'm just leaving it the way it is. This is my granny tuned carburetor, really gentle. And this one is actually decent on gas. I might have one better. Like I said, I got a box of these. I got about 4 of them. And then this one is the opposite. It's tuned on this side for gentle on the primaries, but the secondaries, this is punch. This is full punch when it's floored. So, but anyways, that's what I worked on so far. I'm not really sure when I'm going to get this uploaded yet. So, but this carburetor is going to go on the motor for a while to try out, and we'll see what it does.